I'll be done.
No, you have to sit here.
Thanks, Holly.
You're welcome, Jim.
I said we wait about 5 minutes, and that's perfect timing. So
Sorry. Couldn't get somebody off the phone.
all right, with the arrival of Mr. Murphy, we'll call the meeting of the Metropolitan Charter Revision Commission to order, March 8th, 2019. Thank everyone for being here. I really appreciate that we've got a full contingent of our members. And I do appreciate that. And I think what we're going to do today is hear about the charter amendments that have been proposed. They've not actually been voted on by the council yet. And I appreciate Mr. Rosenberg and the folks from the Metro Council being willing to come and talk to us about their charter amendments and give us an opportunity to hopefully give them some feedback. Then I think the next step will be on the 19th. So we'll go in front of the council, and then we will need to actually have a public hearing and meet before third reading, which would be, or second reading, before April 5. Tell me the timing. I just want to make sure, because we'll talk about that at the end of the meeting, having another meeting.
Great. It's a single meeting resolution, and my hope is to have the council, ask the council to vote on it in the second meeting of April, and give time to take whatever feedback you've got today and whatever else happens through committee over the next couple meetings, and then get that ready to bring before you.
In timing-wise, it has to be voted on by the second meeting in April in order to be on the August ballot.
You could be a little later than that. I think, you've got the 75 and 80-day state and local prior to the August 2nd election, and it works out to mid-May, essentially. So council members could file on the same resolution additional amendments, and they'd have until about April 24th to do that, for it to be part of the same resolution, and as long as the resolution is
So we have a
approved.
little time. I was thinking we needed to do something by early April, but that's good to know that we've got a little more leeway on that. So first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which was August 3rd, 2018. They have been circulated. If anyone has any questions or corrections, let us know. If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? If not, then all those in favor of approving the August 3rd, 2018 minutes, please say aye. Aye. I'll vote in favor also, so they are approved as presented. Ms. Waits, will you do the notice of appeal rights language that we are supposed to do at every meeting?
Sure. If a party wishes to appeal a decision of this board, they're encouraged to seek independent counsel to determine the timelines and make sure all procedures are met. Typically, parties who appeal a decision of a metropolitan board are required to do so within 60 days by filing a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery Court.
Good, thank you. The next item on our agenda is the discussion of the three proposed charter amendments. We have two that relate to the rank order instant runoff voting, and one that is an amendment that would require certain additional information to be disclosed as part of the budget process. I think at this time I'd ask Mr. Rosenberg to explain. We looked at this before. I didn't compare word for word, but it appears to be very similar to the last proposal with some minor modifications perhaps. If you would just kind of explain to us what your proposal entails and why you think that the commission ought to.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. There are two amendments related to ranked choice voting. Amendment B is essentially what was before you last year. Amendment A is a wider-reaching version of it that introduces ranked choice voting for all metro elections, which just means mayor, vice mayor, at-large, and district council. Whereas Amendment B is just for special elections for vice mayor and district council. Since we last met, there's been a lot of activity, both in Nashville, not necessarily related to ranked choice voting, and then also with respect to ranked choice voting nationally. Here in Nashville, we experienced a $500,000 to $750,000 vice mayoral runoff election that 30,000 people voted in cost us close to $20 per voter. And we've also seen additional runoff elections for district council races. In fact, we're in the middle of one of those right now where there were a small handful of people that came out for the special election earlier this year, and the top vote getters got 45 and 43%, I think. But since neither went over 50, we ended up in the state of another election coming up for those folks down there. Nationally, we saw a very successful statewide ranked choice voting election conducted in Maine. Utah passed statewide legislation. Santa Fe and Minneapolis have held instant ranked choice voting elections. Sarasota's got them. And in San Francisco, they had an election where they had municipal elections under ranked choice voting concurrent with a statewide election using their top two primary system. And we got to see that there were a lot of spoiled ballots in the statewide and not so many with the ranked choice voting. Voters did better with it. I don't know that that necessarily applies to Nashville because we have these great voting machines, so spoiled ballots aren't, you can't overvote and do those kind of things that happen with paper ballots. So the, arguments around ranked choice voting fall into a lot of separate categories. One is the significant cost savings of having these elections. Another would be the fact that you run into a lot of voter fatigue. Some voters had 7 to 8 elections last year in Nashville, and it's difficult for people to go and do those, and you generally see turnout really drop off for runoff elections. You end up with a quicker result. You've got your folks in office and vacant offices filled 5-6 weeks earlier. Ranked choice voting incentivizes positive issue-oriented campaigns because when you go and attack an opponent, you're guaranteeing that their supporters are going to rank you last, basically. So it really encourages people to play nicely and get after issues instead of personal attacks. It eliminates the idea that a lot of voters have that they can't vote for their favorite candidate because they don't have a chance to win. There's no such thing as a spoiler candidate because those votes for that guy who gets 3 to 4% get reallocated to a candidate who has a chance to win once that lower candidate is eliminated. And again, we've got these expanded success stories that have happened around ranked choice voting. It's a very simple thing for folks to understand. You go in and you rank your candidates, 1, 2, 3, and you're done with it without having to do another round. So my hope is that we can move forward with this. The legal grounds are murky in Tennessee right now. State statute doesn't speak to ranked choice voting. It's one of those issues where you ask 10 lawyers, get 11 opinions. But there was an effort last year to preempt ranked choice voting that failed, which feels like an indication that it's not illegal under state law. There's also conversations going on right now about legislation, either local option legislation or some sort of preemptive legislation. I'll be meeting with some folks from the state in the coming weeks on the issue. And speaking to that, this legislation includes an escape hatch that says if at any point ranked choice voting is found to be repugnant to state law, we revert to a runoff system. So there's no danger in us having a situation where our charter does not conform to state law because it speaks specifically to needing to be allowable under state law. I could probably drone on for another hour and a half, but I'll spare everyone and stop there.
If I could, other than the legal issues, when you go and speak with groups, what pushback do you get about other problems or reasons not to do it? I'm sure it's going to kind of ask you to look at it from the other side. What do you hear as to why people don't think it's a good idea?
Well, I think only just that there's an education system that comes along with people understanding why they're not going to have to go vote a second time and how the tallying is done. I would submit that if you ask 1,000 Davidson County citizens what the threshold is for an at-large candidate to be elected, 7 of them might understand, how that's calculated. So I don't think that we're taking a step down with that. But I think mostly it's people, the first reaction is generally intrigue and interest and just wanting to learn a little bit more about it.
And is it set up so you vote for as many candidates as there are, or do you just get a certain number?
The legislation is written that it would be at least 6 that you would get to, but Mr. Delanis might know better, but the voting machines that we're going to can handle all these systems that are, as they would be equipped.
How would you meet this challenge that says for offices elected by ranked choice voting, the ballot must be simple and easy to understand? And I'll vote for it. How in the world can you make that ballot simple and easy for people to understand?
I think it naturally is. If it says, rank your choices 1, 2, 3, then you would put a 1 next to your first choice, a 2 next to your second choice, and a 3 next to your third.
But would there be some kind of educational process for folks before this type of election is just kind of sprung on them and you're faced with doing this kind of ballot?
Jeff Roberts, our administrator of elections, has suggested that they would undertake some educational work prior to the election.
Ben, I missed what you were saying. You said if it contains a provision that if part of it is stricken down by a court, then you would revert back to the old system. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes.
Now, how long would that take? That would take a time-consuming affair, isn't it? If the court struck down part or all of it, then the court would order that, according to the ordinance, it would go back to the regular election process.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I don't understand.
But that would take a while, wouldn't it? I mean, we would have to, or you're saying that this would be brought immediately, I guess. The challenge to the law would be brought quickly, and maybe it would be decided on the fast track before the election. Is that what you're hoping?
Well, I'm saying that if at any point it becomes illegal, whether through a court decision, then any future elections would then be held with a runoff the way we do now.
It would revert back to the current charter.
Right. I was wondering how the length of time involved in that. I'm sure somebody will challenge it immediately.
Are you suggesting, like, if there were a court case going on after the election had already taken place?
Yeah.
The following term.
I'm sorry.
So if
John, please jump in.
if this gets on the August ballot, which is what they're shooting for, that's the same time that the regular metropolitan general election is. So it wouldn't take effect until the following, well, depending on which one you did. If you did it for the general election, it would take effect 4 years from now, essentially.
So the earliest would be 2023.
Yeah, unless there was a special election in the interim.
Depends on which amendment you adopt.
Right.
Right.
Do you have any update on the Attorney General's ruling for the Shelby County?
The state coordinator of elections has written a letter. His most recent administrative ruling, his most recent administrative opinion is that you can't do it. That's since been challenged in court. He largely in the letter talked about the inadequacy of Memphis's ordinance, which is about 3 sentences long. It doesn't really speak to any process or anything. And he also said at the end of the letter, and also there are problems under state law without really going into them.
Is that We had at the last meeting, and when we considered this in August, it was September 26, 2017. Is there anything since then?
Yeah.
There is something since then?
Yeah, so Nikki can probably speak better to this, but I think there was a challenge, a court challenge in Memphis that was thrown out basically for standing, I think. In February of this year, Mark Goines issued an order, or whatever they call it, saying that the Memphis system is not consistent with state law. That has now been challenged. There was a petition filed just a couple weeks ago challenging that decision, and so
is that like a state administrative process where you go to ALJ, and is that how that works?
Administrative, APA
Yes.
appeal, isn't it?
Yes.
Administrative Procedures Act. So they filed it in Davidson County Chancery.
Well, my understanding is on February 19th, a new petition for declaratory order was filed with Mark Goins,
Okay.
asking him to again look at this issue.
So they've not gone
so they
to court
didn't go
yet.
to court yet.
Yeah, they went to court before, but that was thrown out. That was dismissed. So I'm not aware that they've gone to court
So
again.
what's the basis for they wanting to look at it again?
Well, I can tell you what the
Yeah.
petition says. I mean, the Shelby County ordinance, he did address some issues there, so we can just kind of overlook that. I think the biggest state law concern is there is a statute that says voters can only mark one candidate.
Right.
Now that is, I mean, when that statute was enacted, that was not contemplating ranked choice voting. I mean, that's so you can't vote twice. But that is what the statute says. So Mark Goines' opinion is that, since there's, I guess, no specific enabling authorization for it, that statute would control.
And as I recall, John, that was the issue in August when we were here last. That was
Right,
the
and we knew
concern.
that it was being challenged in court then. That court challenge has now been thrown out, but we're in this second round of challenging the administrators.
And I hadn't really perused the minutes carefully, but my recollection from that meeting was I questioned, isn't there an easy fix to this, which is go to the state legislature and have them fix the statute? Is there any legislation pending to fix the statute?
Not any at this moment that I'm aware of.
Well, the bill filing
There
deadline.
are caption bills.
Okay, but, I mean, I think, to me, I have trouble passing this in the face of those opinions because I think we create the same problem here as they have in Memphis, which is people don't know what the rules are. And I understand you've tried to fix that with some language that says if this is repugnant to state law, but again, it's not clear who makes that determination. And part of the problem that I think Mr. Delanis mentioned at our last meeting was that if they try to put ranked choice voting on the ballot and send it to the state coordinator of elections who has to approve your ballot before you can hold an election, he's going to disapprove it. Is that enough? Does that mean that we then have our election under the old law or the new law? It doesn't. I mean, this doesn't say what is required for it to be found to be. Who has to find it to be repugnant with state law? And I think that's part of my concern is, what, to me, we're just getting in, throwing ourselves into the same morass that Memphis is in. And I think a lot of what you say makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of it being a really better way to do things. I'm not arguing that one with you at all. But I just don't know that it makes sense to change the charter when you're just going to throw yourself into the same quagmire that Memphis is in. And if we've got 4 years to wait anyway, why don't we wait until Memphis gets this issue resolved on the Memphis front and see if we can then do it, or do it even simpler, which is to go ahead and get the legislature to pass a bill this year that says you can do this. Because I just think I understand that there is a fallback, but if people think this is what they've got and it turns out it's not what they've got, they're not going to be happy. So that's just my concern. I also, one of the questions is a good one. What will the ballot look like? I think it would be good before when we have our public hearing to have have examples of what it looks like in other places, so that then some of those things can get. We can have more information about it, so that the questions, what is this going to do? How does it work? Will be easier to address. I think for me, what worries me about it is just kind of the unintended consequences, and since we don't know what they are, that's what worries me a little bit. But I'd like to know kind of what has happened in other places that have done it. What have been the pros and what have been the cons. And I understand that there are, as you point out, some really good pros. I'm not questioning that those are not desirable. I just don't know what the negatives are, and I haven't been able to figure out mathematically whether that, whether you get an unintended consequence, whether you get someone elected through this system when the voters will say, well, how did he get elected? Because that's, I think, the one thing in our system that you got to worry about is people questioning how somebody got elected. In our current system,
I think there's some of that going on right now.
Well, on the national level there is. On the national level there is, but there's really not at the local and state level. And I think that's one of the things that's I would hate to create a system that makes us more like the national system than the local and state systems, because those are things. There are costs that are associated with that. But if those things are not real risks, then maybe that's not a problem. And I just don't know enough about it to know, and I'd like to know a little bit more before I, went forward and said, okay, I think this is a good thing. Because if there are not any real serious downsides, it's got a lot of positives. And then if we could just get the state legislature to deal with it, then Baylor can go and get them to do whatever she wants them to. So.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that comment.
I've got a question just as far as the voting equipment itself. How does that play into the changes per, as we do it now versus this system?
The Election Commission is implementing new machines that'll be in place this August, and they're fully equipped to handle
Either program.
Correct.
And Jim Delanis is here. And Jim, I know you have some thoughts on this, and I was glad you could come. I know you don't officially represent the Election Commission unless something has changed, but you're chairman of the Davidson County.
You have a letter that's been signed off on by all the commissioners, and it was written last year and sent to City Council. It was basically the same situation, so I do think the letter does apply, and I've got a copy of it here. I also downloaded some instructions and explanations by Maine from their official website. It's got a sample ballot on it. It's only got like 5 or 6 people on the ballot. I think in the mayor's race, it had 17 people, so you'd have to almost, triple the size.
Is that an issue, Jim, from a voting machine standpoint? Can you?
I don't think so. No, I think it can be done. We are buying new equipment. We hope we'll have the new equipment in place. But of course, I don't think the August election is going to be a ranked choice voting anyway. But we are buying new equipment, and best we can tell, all 3 of the contenders to get the contract can accommodate ranked choice voting.
Can I ask for you to check and see if any of them actually do currently provide a machine that's used for ranked choice voting?
That's a good question.
I'm not expecting you to know the answer, but if you could get that back to us, that would be very helpful.
Yes.
Because I think that's a good point. I think, you know, if that's the trend of the future, we need to be looking at, you know, not only do they say they can do it, but have they actually used this machine in one of these elections?
They
Yes.
put it into
Put it in action and it didn't blow up, you know, because again, that's part of what I think just the confidence in the system would be, you know, obviously changing the way you do it is one thing. If you then have a system or a machine that blows up or creates problems, people will just say, you know, y'all are doing something to keep me from voting. And I think that we need to be very careful if it's rigged to begin with, yeah.
And my question, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
My question related to the transition time, assuming that you are going from a primary system to the ranked choice voting, and there's this contest close to the election period, how long would it take to transition those machines from one to the other? Is it a flip of a switch?
I don't think it would take long. They can be programmed to handle either one. I mean, my concern, and this is my personal concern because it's not on this letter, is that we can have an election contest, we could have a challenge to this before the election, and it would have to be basically decided before the election occurs, but there also can be a challenge after the election, and that could put things in, you know, in limbo for a long time. We've got a lot of lawyers on this panel, and you don't know how long litigation is going to take. You don't know whether it's going to go directly to the Supreme Court from Chancery Court or whether it's going to go to the Court of Appeals. You don't know whether they're going to reach down and handle it right away. And you could have a situation where one person, we've got results under one system, and then all of a sudden that changes.
Well, I mean, one thing you can be assured of, it'll take a long time.
It's not going to be a week
Not
or
going
two.
to be quick, right?
How long, too long?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's part of why I say if this is really the way folks want to go, going to the legislature and getting as many of those things off the table is the right course, because then there's no issue with, well, this statute says you can only vote one person. The real question is, does your charter provision follow what the state law says? And if they two match up, then we should be in good shape, because I don't think there's any overarching constitutional type challenge that would prevent you from doing ranked choice voting. I think it's just the current law is very, very old and to never contemplate this kind of system. And so, to me, that's part of the reason why I come back to saying it would be better if we did it, go to the legislature first, bring the charter amendment in place that matches what the state legislation says, because then you've got less risk of litigation being successful. You always have a chance of there being some litigation, but again, if the litigation has very little, if any, merit, you know, that's a risk you can take. But if there is a question and it takes a year, and then in a year you find out everybody that's been elected at Metro is not properly elected, you know, that's a problem. And I think that's just not the way to go. It's too important a thing to risk, I guess, is my concern.
And that's why I brought up the question, where is it at? Because I think there's a practicality to it, but there's also, what is the integrity of going forward if you know that there's something that's still there that another entity's already challenged?
Right.
So why is the body bringing something forward that they know could be so disruptive? You know, when you can either, as you said, one alternative is to work the legislature and get the proper legislation addressed, or wait till there's a finding in this and you can still move forward at that point.
Do you know anybody on the Hill that's discussed it or expressed some interest in it?
Yes, and there are a couple meetings coming up in the coming weeks to discuss opportunities to...
Which committee?
It would be Senate, State, and Local, and whatever the new corresponding committee is.
Bill that
There's some, there are some captions that would take this in. It's just a matter of the challenge of getting the legislature to focus on something of value.
Well, Jim Murphy makes it sound really easy.
Getting the legislature
I didn't say it was easy for me.
allow
I said it
local
was easy
entity
for
to do
you.
something they want to do.
Yes, exactly. To not take away power from locals, but
I've got a kind of a follow-up question, and maybe Mike and John can address this. Let's say the legislature doesn't do anything, and there's an interest still in going forward with this, regardless of what we may say one way or the other. How does the challenge happen? Let's say that it gets on it is on the ballot for August. The charter amendment is, and someone wants to challenge it. It seems like one option is it goes to Mark Goins or whoever the state elections coordinator is, and they say we're not going to approve your ballot if it has that on it, and then someone would have to appeal that. I guess another option is someone files a lawsuit and says I'm a voter, and they somehow have standing or can assert standing and challenge it that way. What are the mechanisms to get a determination as to whether this is in fact legal or not? And you may not have thought all that through yet.
I'm not a litigator, but I'll try. I guess you could have a DEC action, declaratory judgment action, getting the court to determine whether this is consistent with state law. Then you run into issues of who has standing to bring that, and it's my understanding that just general voter standing is tough. The best standing is a candidate. So I think the best way to get it to court would be if the state said, no, I'm not going to authorize your ballot, and then a candidate filed suit challenging that decision. That would be probably the easiest way to get it to court.
And what, Nikki, if you know, what's the status of the Memphis? They filed a petition, and they've asked Mark Goins to review it or do something.
Yeah, they're basically setting forth their opinions regarding those TCA sections and Mark Goins' construction of those TCA section and how they have a different construction. So my understanding is Mark is going to go through the same process and then make a determination.
So the people that have appealed this one, are they different than who appealed the first?
I think they are.
I think it would have to be because there was a standing issue.
The first time it was Election Commission, as I recall, and I thought they had said they weren't going to pursue it any further. They were just going to.
Yeah, I think these the people that filed the new one are new people, because when I look at this, the first one was the Shelby County Election Commission versus the coordinator. This one are individuals that have an interest in ranked choice voting, so they're 4 individual petitioners.
My recollection is that the lawsuit that got dismissed was filed by individuals, so that it's the same people.
Yeah,
I think it was kicked more on rightness because they had the Election Commission's case was still pending.
And it's actually some of those same individuals are the ones.
That's kind of what I suspected might be the case. Okay.
Pretty much, I see 2 of the names.
Okay.
That filed the Chancery Court lawsuit, that also filed the petition before the coordinator, the February 19th petition.
And so then after, where they are in the process is they filed, I guess, a new petition for a declaratory ruling at the agency level. Then Mark makes a decision, and then they go into court and have the Chancery Court review that. What they did before is they tried to, they got reversed. They filed their court action before he had resolved, before he made his decision, and they were not parties to the decision, so they couldn't appeal.
Gotcha.
So I think what they're trying to do is get an appeal so that it will go into court,
Good.
is what it sounds like.
Yeah, to have a way to ask the court to review any decision made by the coordinator. Yeah.
Do we know why there's not been a request to the Attorney General to issue an opinion on this? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
speculation, I guess. I would think that it would be
Yeah.
an easy thing for a state rep, or I assume that the Secretary of State or the Elections Coordinator has the authority to ask for the Attorney General's opinion.
Probably, but I think,
Ultimately, they're going to go, these people are going to go to court.
Court, that's-
Yeah, that'd be my guess, is that.
Yeah, I'm wondering, will the Attorney General want to render opinion?
Probably
when
not
he's
now.
defending?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Probably not now. And it's probably too late at this
Well,
point.
and if they like it, they say it's the Attorney General. If they don't like it, they say it's one man's opinion.
Right, that's it.
I mean, the coordinator, I don't think the coordinator thinks there's ambiguity in the provisions of the TCA. So the coordinator has adopted a particular construction which the coordinator believes is clearly consistent with the TCA. So they probably don't see a need to ask for a formal opinion. Yeah.
And Dave, if I can ask you, do you have a timing, or or that you're willing to maybe comfortable talking about as far as getting with the legislature? I thought we were on a little shorter time leash than we actually are. It sounds like we do have a few more weeks to do something. Do you have a sense as to whether, I mean, it seems like I'm hearing from a lot of us that let the legislature fix this and then we know what we're doing. And do you have any sense of timing of when you may have an answer one way or the other? Yes, this is something that may be addressed, or no, this is something that's not going to be addressed.
I think in a couple weeks, I'll have an idea of whether this is something that they're going to consider or not. I
So maybe
just
by the
learned
time
to
we
not
have
be
our-
optimistic when it comes to the legislature. But yeah, that's the hope.
I think you'll see the committee shutting down kind of beginning mid-April.
Okay.
Jim, I know you were kind enough to come. You referenced your letter. Is that the letter that was sent, we saw?
To City Council.
Council
Last
in
year.
August, I guess, or early September.
August 17th letter, yes, sir. I don't know if y'all want that. I just have some materials here. You can.
I'd love to be able to review your materials, Mr.
I think it would be helpful to have, so.
May not.
Did you bring enough for everybody?
I'm not sure, but.
Well, if you didn't, I'm sure Elizabeth would be happy to send us all a copy.
Oh, wait a minute, excuse me.
Three more copies of this.
You've got all of them.
Probably four.
And you don't have anything with the other.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We've each got
Okay, Dave, anything else you'd like to add at this point? I know we'll have another opportunity to talk about it in a public hearing, but just curious. After hearing what we have to say, is there something that,
I would respond to some of the concerns about process, but it sounds like the overarching concern are the legal concerns. I think it's an important question that Mr. Murphy asked, but, who gets to decide what's repugnant to state law, and that needs to be addressed. And also trying to understand the process if there's litigation that's pending. And I'll also see if I can find some ballots from around the country, from places that use the machines, and so we can get an idea of what those have
I'm
looked like.
interested in that, whether it helps us make a decision or not. I can't guarantee you
Seeing
it
more
will
than I've seen.
Well, and the other thing is, if we have a public hearing, there's likely to be members of the public here who, if we have some of this information that they can peruse, then you already are starting the educational process. You're getting a larger group of people to understand what it looks like, what the battle will look like. I mean, when I look at this, it's like, that doesn't look hard. When I look at these examples, it's like, yeah, this could work. And so, I think that's the kind of thing. It would just be a matter of, working through what happens. and again, what the experiences have been in other places that have used it. I think that's the thing. I think the one thing I would worry with is if someone could say, well, I won, but for the ranked choice voting, I would have been in the runoff, and as opposed, and now I'm out, I've lost. And I don't know, if that's happened in other places, or does the ranked choice voting tend to end up having, again, I know sometimes you have really close 1 and 2s, but it's just, do you have a situation where people can say, well, I don't know how that guy got elected. That's the thing I always am concerned about.
Sure. There are basically 3 types of voting. There's the plurality voting, which we have for president, especially in presidential primaries. And that we have for school board elections and legislative elections. There's the majority versus via runoff, and then there's majority via ranked choice voting. And I think those plurality elections are the ones where you get the real questions, where somebody wins a school board seat with 21% of the vote, wins the legislative primary, or a lot of presidents who become president with under 50% of the vote that would have swung the other way had ranked choice voting been in place. There have been elections where somebody finished, if you have a school board election where people finish with 20, 19, 18, 17, and 16%, you could have, under a plurality election, somebody who's highly objectionable to 79% of people get elected with 21%. And that's the person who's going to say, I would have won without ranked choice voting, even though we're not talking about going from plurality to ranked choice vote. We're talking about majority. But you can have that situation where a lot of people really love those second and third place people. In the first place is just a fringe candidate who snuck across the finish line there. So you can have somebody finish first and then not, who would have been in a runoff.
I don't know that that's necessarily bad. I'm not necessarily saying that's bad. I'd like to have a better understanding of kind of how those scenarios play out. How that, what's been the experience in communities that have done it a lot as far as what have been perceived to be the negatives. I think that's, if you really want to get at what I'm looking at, is where the places that do it in their negatives, what are the negatives that people complain about, so that we can look at it and say, okay, well, you would have had that problem anyway. It's like you said, somebody gets 21% of the vote and complains that they didn't win. Well, you're not going to win with 21% of the vote if there's a runoff either. I mean, you have to go to a runoff and get elected in a runoff. So that isn't a proper comparison. But if there are some concerns, those are the kinds of things I'd like to look at, just so that I know. Because the opponents to this will come up with those at some point, and so it'd be better to look at them and address them on the front end than doing it after the fact when we're having to actually do it, live with it.
Did you consider including other local elections like school board or general sessions judges or ones that aren't?
No, I mean, a lot of those are state chartered and didn't want to get into all that, and those are plurality elections, and going to this would be really trying to solve the problem of runoff elections with all this, and we don't have them for these other races. So in our school board, it is a well-oiled machine, so there's no change needed there.
Well, tell that.
It used to be.
That's right.
Up until a point in time.
All right. Anybody, any further questions of Jim or Dave or legal folks? Well, I want to say thank you for, one, promoting this concept. And I really think it has, for some of the reasons you mentioned, it has it's very appealing and has merit. So I hope we can get a little more comfort from a legality standpoint between now and the time we have our next hearing. And I think what Jim and others have said is critical, if there is a way to get the legislature to take this up and address some of these hanging chads, for lack of a better term, where no one sure is exactly how it could be ultimately determined whether it was legal or not.
And yeah, thank you for being thorough and thoughtful and really conscientious about this process.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask?
Thank you for all your hard work, Ben.
So I'm sorry to interject, but I just want to make sure that I make the right verbiage for the minutes. And so is ranked choice voting the same as instant runoff voting, or are they two different things? Okay.
Same thing.
Okay.
Jim, anything else you'd like to add? Thank you for being here on behalf of the Election Commission and in your individual capacity when they haven't spoken. Okay, then we will move on to the third amendment, and that you are not sponsor of
Correct.
that. Okay. The other, we have the two on that Mr. Rosenberg has proposed, that I think we've had a great discussion on. Thank you all for your thoughtfulness on it. And the third one is would amend certain language that's disclosed as part of the budget process. And is that John, can you speak to that? Who can, is there someone here that can really
Who wants to speak for John,
that?
the other John Cooper?
The other John Cooper?
That would be Mike Jameson.
Well, I thought since your name was John Cooper, it might work out, so.
No, he's the other
We
John
tend not to speak for each other, right?
Councilman Cooper couldn't be here today, but he is the sponsor of this proposed charter amendment. The charter currently provides that for the operating budget, you have three components: the fund balances for each of the funds within the metro government, the revenues for each of those balances, and proposed expenditures for the ensuing year. Councilman Cooper's amendment would add to that essentially a statement of the total debt, phrased both as a total and per capita. And then the second significant change would be, in addition to simply a fiscal statement, that the annual operating budget also include performance metrics for departments, but giving wide latitude to the Director of Finance to both determine what those performance criteria or metrics would be, and also the criteria to omit departments whose functions just may not lend themselves well to performance metrics. So to flesh out a selfish example, it may occur to people that a good metric for public works is the number of feet of sidewalks that have been installed one year compared to the next. But there are other departments, I would submit that perhaps the Metro Council office, exactly what is success for the Metro Council office compared to the previous year is harder to measure.
More bills or less?
Yeah.
That's exactly the debate we've had. But so leaving that discretion to the finance director intentionally. The only thing I could add to that performance metric discussion was that I think it was started under the Purcell administration. Where results matter indicia within the budget books that had exactly that, sort of the number of miles of sidewalk that Public Works had done the preceding year and what they did the year after. So this would essentially mandate that requirement.
So would this performance metrics for boards and commissions include the Charter Revision Commission?
I'm trying to help you with your metrics.
Number of
Again,
revisions of
is that fewer meetings or more?
Anything else, Mike, that you think Councilman John Cooper would want us to know about this proposed amendment?
Not that I can think of, but he is brilliant in these affairs, so I'm sure I'm doing injustice to his summary of it. But I think I've relayed the substance of what he has relayed to me.
And would it be on the? I think I understand on the. Indebtedness. You take, I guess, all the bonded indebtedness, all the short-term indebtedness, whatever obligations that I guess would be more than a one-year period, I guess is how that would be defined. And you would say it is X $100 million, whatever it is, and that works out to $113 per citizen in Davidson County. Is that what
Correct.
the concept is?
So I omitted one category, is that he also includes the percentage increase or decrease from the preceding year of that total debt amount.
So can I ask you a couple of questions about that?
You can ask questions.
That you can relate to the sponsor.
Yes.
So I understand the concept kind of generally, but I also understand that you actually have different payers depending on whether you're talking about GO versus revenue. And so if you're talking about GO bonds, then obviously, you know, the population of the county might make sense. If you're talking about revenue bonds, you know, water and sewer doesn't cover the whole county technically, because, you know, you've got Harpeth Valley and you've got other utility districts that are providing utility service for parts of the county that are metro. And so if you lump all those two together, that's not really an accurate reflection of cost per capita, because if I live in Harpeth Valley, I don't have any obligation to pay water and sewer revenue bonds because they're paid by rates. Same with any of the revenue bonds are really a different animal than a GO. So I think one of the things I would suggest, Mike, is that we think about, you know, when we talk about debt, we need to talk about what kind of debt, because there are different kinds, and they don't really, it doesn't really lend itself to this equation if you're talking about revenue bonds, because many of those are the convention center. Most people in Davidson County aren't paying tourism taxes, which are a lot of what those are funded out of. And so again, I think when you look at what debt really means, it's not as easy as saying, look at debt, because there's multiple kinds of debt and it's paid for out of different sources of funding. And if you're talking about GO debt, I think that's easy. I understand that one, and I think that has a per capita connection, because, you know, if you live in Davidson County, you're paying GO debt. So that's just my question that you can convey back to the sponsor. Because again, I'm a big believer in accuracy and reporting. So if we're going to report something, let's report it accurately. I guess I have one other question, and that is on the performance measuring concept. And this might be for the other John Cooper to answer, but has the Director of Finance weighed in at all on this as a issue? Are they supportive, opposed? What is the?
I have not heard a position from her. Going back to results matter, which kind of seems to be the impetus of this. As you recall from your days as director, there is the budget ordinance, which is what the Director of Finance and the Director of Law sign, and that is the budget as referred to in the charter. Then you have a book that's this thick that is called the budget book, but it's really more of an informational kind of thing. So when Purcell implemented Results Matter, it was part of that budget book, not the ordinance. So this would, by charter, shift that into the actual ordinance itself. So, I mean, logistically, they would have to figure out how to do that, but that's really the only difference.
So, I mean, one other question back to the sponsor would be, instead of putting it in the budget ordinance, could it be a requirement that it be provided in the supporting documents for the budget ordinance, like the budget book, so that, you know, I'm with John, I'm not sure it really fits in the ordinance, because the ordinance is, this is what you're appropriating money for. That's really what the ordinance does. And this isn't really doing that. This is information. And I think requiring, I don't have any problem requiring it to be provided as part of the budget, you know, the documents that are submitted with the budget. But putting in the ordinance does seem to be a little bit like, what does that mean? I know you can't answer that, but just, if you'll convey that back to the sponsor, that would be nice.
I think I can play devil's advocate and just state, if you look at the current code, the council nor the code historically specifies what has to go into the budget book. because presumably they want some flexibility.
Well, I understand, but if you want to have this to be required to be in the budget book, I think that is something that makes some sense to be in the charter. I'm not saying don't put it in the charter that says as part of the budget book, it has to be in there, but I don't know that it needs to be in the quote budget ordinance.
No, I hear you, on the supportive documents.
Yeah,
And
right,
the budget book isn't required by any
right.
charter or law. It's just kind of.
Right, but there would be, at least if this passes, some information. It might not have to be a budget book, but there would be some information that would have to accompany the budget to meet this requirement, and I think that's fine. And I think having that in the charter doesn't offend me, because, you know, if the council says we need to make sure this information comes each year with the budget, putting it in the charter is a way to make sure that happens. I guess you could.
You could also do it by ordinance.
Yes, you could.
That's going to be, why would this have to be in the charter? Why couldn't there just be?
Well, I mean,
Because next term, the ordinance.
yeah, you know, you've got equal parity. You know, one ordinance has the same weight as another ordinance, and so it could be changed. Putting in the charter and does kind of cement it.
Right. That's what I was saying. It doesn't offend me to put it, to require it. I just don't know that it needs to be in the truly in the budget that is part of the ordinance. So I think if we could just differentiate that as part of the amendment, that would be helpful.
I have a question, and it may not be a good one at all, okay? So would this apply, or would it be also good to have an opinion? Once the Board of Education has money, they can go ahead and make other decisions. I mean, correct, Michael? I mean,
Yeah.
So does this apply to the board, or just like asking about what is the response from our finance director? Has anybody talked to an entity like the Board of Education about?
Can I ask, what in results matter, the Board of Ed?
No, they did not participate in results matter. It was just the general fund departments.
I imagine that's
General
one that Talia may exempt from
Yeah,
criteria. Number of shouting matches.
So would this apply to the board?
No, that's what he said. That the finance director has the ability to take them out.
And would?
And then the question becomes, you know, what happens if the finance director says, yeah, I want it, and the school board says no? I mean, you know, what do you do with that? Because they are a different animal, because you have limited control over what you can do with them.
You don't get it. That's what happens if they say no.
And I can circle back to get further clarity on the notion that there are different payors of debt. The current charter is just so broad when it talks about current revenues, and there are different payors of revenue, but the charter doesn't itemize that. We've always figured it out. However, to my knowledge, we've not had difficulty.
Well, my point just is, when you talk about total debt is somewhat misleading in a per capita comparison, because, you know, if you're saying, well, the debt load per capita is X, and that's revenue, well, that might not really be a per capita cost, because I might not pay 1 penny for that debt.
I guess my point is, I think finance would figure that out, just as they figured out when we asked for total revenues. They know that means
if they
Mitchell Water
can
may
say,
have.
if they can give that, I mean, if they come back and say, okay, we can tell you, you know, on a per customer basis, how many customers are paying, you know, from water and sewer, then you could probably calculate that as a per capita cost and add it to the GO per capita cost, and that would make sense. Convention center, those kind of entities become a lot harder, because they're not on a customer basis. They're on a, you know, hotel motel tax or those kind of things. And so that's why I say it's a little more, I'm not, and to the extent that you can come up with a per customer calculation, it doesn't offend me to include that in the cost. It's just, I think you've got to be careful about just taking big numbers and saying, okay, well, we're going to say that we've got this much in GO and this much in revenue, and we're going to add those two up and divide it by the population, because that's not really an accurate number.
You have homeowners, you have renters.
Well, but again, at the end of the day, it is going to be a rough approximation, but like the water and sewer thing, there are big pieces of the county that are not in the water and sewer system. And so that
There are parts of other counties that are.
and that's the other thing, John, is there are parts of other counties that are, and they shouldn't be included either, because they're not paying on the GO. So that's part of why I say it might be too difficult to include that, just because it doesn't. I mean, if you want to talk about total customer for the revenue for water and sewer, and say, okay, we've got this is the per capita for GO, and this is the per customer, and you can figure out whether you're in both. That'd be, because if you did it that way, everybody could say, well, I pay water bill and I pay GO, so I'm both. But as John says, you got all the parts don't match up, and so it becomes hard to sort out who's in which pot if you blend them all together. That's, I guess, my concern, is just the blend is not going to be an accurate reflection. If you specified those pieces, it might get closer if you could figure out how do you exclude things that are funded out of tourism, things like that, where it's really hard to say how much hotel motel tax I pay as a resident of Davidson County.
Probably not much.
I would hope not much. Unless I can't live in my house and I have to go to a hotel one night.
I've got a question about the performance and efficiency measurements. When I came in here, I thought I understood what that was, but now I don't think I'm so sure. And I know, Mike, I may be asking you to look into a crystal ball and say what the sponsor meant, but my understanding of that when I came in here was there would be some measurement, some a quantifiable thing that you would put in the budget for, as Jim or somebody said, so many feet of sidewalks for public works, or so many feet of new, stormwater sewer for, other departments. And then the next year you would say, how did you compare to that? Is that what you think the sponsor has in mind, or what am I maybe missing on that?
No, I think you named it. And of course, there'd be a value in consistency, because if you change the measurement next year, it's apples to oranges. But I know he has looked at the results matter criteria for the various departments. And I don't profess to know what his thinking was from that. He may find those satisfactory or not, but he does completely leave it to the discretion of the finance department to determine what those criteria are.
Am I the only one that maybe has some hesitation about that's an incredible burden to put on the finance director?
No.
I bet the finance department shares that opinion.
That's one I ask, what is the finance director's position on this? And the other, though, is, as John and Mike have both mentioned, they did it under results matter. And I guess the question is, are they still gathering that same information and just not giving it to the council, or?
Well, wouldn't they have if some of their sources are federal monies or state monies, so they applied and they had to state some things, wouldn't they have some measurements from those drawdowns?
For grants, yes.
Yeah. But see, that makes more sense to me, just because when I was at a not-for-profit, I knew that if I was going to say I wanted to have this many participants in an adult day program, I knew what my staffing would be. When I think about a tornado 20 years ago, we did not know what we were going to need in terms of public works. So there's some things that are easy to capture, and you have realistic expectations. This is what it's going to cost in manpower if I'm going to have this kind of coverage, whether it's attorneys or firemen or public works and picking up trash, and now we're going to go to twice a month on recycling. You have some specific theories, but you don't always have specifics.
Those unusual.
Well, and I think that's what Results Matter had, some of that kind of in it, how many miles of sidewalks did you pave?
Yeah.
How many miles of streets did you pave? There are some metrics that you can measure, and then, but the problem is, if it's just a simple comparison, that doesn't necessarily give you an answer, because let's say you had 1,000 miles of sidewalks last year. This year you have a tornado and you have 10 miles of sidewalks because you spent most of the year dealing with the tornado. Does that mean you haven't done a good job? No, it just means you did a different job. It means you did a job that's not in your metrics. And I think that's part of the difficulty with the metrics, is it can give you a good measure if things stay the same or relatively same, and the question just is, if they don't, why not?
And the same thing applies to some of these contracts. Again, I'm making a comparison to my experience, but so if I started a contract, I was not going to do as much in the first year for some things, but it was going to accelerate. And so you don't need to compare in a totality, this is what was accomplished, because it wasn't supposed to be accomplished at the same rate.
No, I think all of those things go into kind of the value of the metric. I think that's the real question, is, will these things really help? Maybe. I mean, it does give you a baseline. It might not give you much more than that, though,
So another question would be, does what he want to have is, say, if we have a 3-year plan to complete this kind of development, or if we have a 3-year plan to increase recycling, then we want to have a measurement that says something to that. Is that what he wants to have, is something that looks like we are intentional beyond the fiscal year in how we make choices?
I don't
You
know
can't
what
speak
it
to
is.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's beyond Mike's ability to anticipate what the councilman wants. You're asking way too many questions.
Well, the language says that it's a part of the annual operating budget, and to your point, the planning, the actions that actually occur in Metro budget aren't directly correlated to the annual operating budget. How long does it take to get a sidewalk?
Mm-hmm.
All right, anybody else have thoughts about?
And I said this is also going to be at the public, right?
Yes.
This will be at the same public hearing.
This law, we will have a public hearing.
So maybe Councilman Cooper can come to the public hearing and we can ask him these harder questions.
And I think it would be nice, Mike, if you could convey back to him just some of the questions and concerns that we have about how the determination of debt works, and as Jim pointed out, the difference between a general obligation or a revenue bond, and how you address that as far as a per capita, and then the discussion about the performance metrics, and how that is determined. And again, my question on that too is that necessary to put that into the charter? Is that not something that could be done by ordinance? And in keeping with, I know it's a framework, it's not going to address every circumstance, but I have some concern about the total open-endedness of the provision about performance and efficiency measurements. I just almost feel there needs to be some tightening of what would be expected of the finance director, and how the finance director would in some way, maybe language that they would work with the various departments to arrive at a performance and an efficiency measure. I could just see, you hope it doesn't happen, but you have someone who's mad at a particular department, and so they decided, well, in this budget I'm going to put in, you need to do, these are your performance measurements, when that may not be in the best interest of the city. So that's part of my concern, is leaving so much open-ended discretion to one office.
One thing to think about, Mike, is it might be that what we ought to do is have, before the budget is filed, have the finance director submit the performance measures to the council for approval, in advance of the budget so that way
You
you've
don't
kind of
mean,
gotten.
you don't mean this budget. You
No,
mean
no,
if
no.
this kicks in.
Yes, it just kicks in. What I'm saying is, as a part of the process, instead of just saying the finance director will do that, have the finance director basically have to bring it to the council and have the council approve it, and that might then
That's
kind
part,
of,
yeah. Part of the budget.
create some structure to kind of give that, to have those performance measures vetted more publicly. I think that might be a good idea. I'm not totally wedded to that, but I think that might.
My guess is the finance director would prefer as much flexibility as possible.
I'm sure of that, but I think the other part of that too, though, is it does kind of keep, it does kind of force everybody to do it and come up with kind of an agreed upon system. And if the finance director is being unreasonable, it gives the department an opportunity to talk to the council and say, wait a minute, I don't like this one.
It gives you some check.
Yeah.
I might just add at the end, I don't know if there are going to be any more proposed charter amendments. I am curious if, depending on what the state does with respect to community oversight boards, what was adopted this past November had some well-publicized concerns, and maybe we can tweak that by ordinance rather than another charter amendment that fixes the actual charter amendment. But we had some difficulty figuring out what a community organization was, for example, and I don't know if anybody's going to propose that, but we're all waiting to see what they do at the General Assembly. So.
I guess you could say part of it depends on what the legislature ultimately.
Well, and I guess we're going to have another meeting, right? And so if anything's ready for that meeting, then I guess we can look at those at our next meeting.
Address it at that point. And so Mike, what would be the absolute latest someone could file and get it on is it that April 19th?
If they get it to our office April 24th, then that is our deadline for preparing.
April 24th would get them on the first meeting in May.
Correct. Would get this current pending resolution would be able to add as an amendment to that gets on and then is approved by the first meeting in May. I think that's right. I'd like to double check that.
So I guess one question is, do we need to wait to meet until there's no chance there's any more, so that we've got?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so that there's no chance that, because I think aren't we supposed to make a recommendation before it goes to y'all, before y'all act on it? I mean, so that's why I was asking too, is thinking through is.
So it gets, I'm just making sure I'm remembering the process. Someone introduces a charter amendment and then it's referred to us before the council votes on it. So does it get filed and then there's an automatic referral or deferral to us?
Usually it will get filed and then referred to you, and they're then deferred while the commission considers it.
And they're also deferred until you get to the right window
Right timing,
to get it
yeah.
on the August 1 ballot. And that's what Mike is saying. If he's first meeting, and it has to be the first meeting, right? Because the deadline is middle of May.
Yeah.
And so you can't get the second meeting in May. It'll have to be the first meeting in May.
Correct.
So probably we need to look at something soon.
Are you trying to determine what your filing day is for the
Right.
council?
The council rules in terms of when you have to have it to the council office for us to have prepared it before it gets on to, yeah.
So that Friday is the 26th, actually. So, and then the filing day in our office would be Tuesday, April 30th, so Friday.
But 2 days before that would be our rule, the council rule of if you expect us to draft it, let us know by
Oh, okay.
Wednesday.
Well, yeah, that's
and-
April 24th.
And then, first council, so the
I didn't know about that
meeting in
one.
May is the first.
Nobody does.
When is the council meeting in May?
That's May 7th.
Oh, good, so it's late, that's good.
Yeah, because the
That happens
first
to
day is actually a Wednesday.
That works out well. So what we ought to do is look at meeting maybe the week of of April 29, 30, May 1, 2, 3. I think that way then we would know what was
What's been filed.
going to be coming, and we would have a public hearing and do the full-blown thing that we're supposed to do to make a vote and recommendation.
So really, we probably need to wait after the 30th, right? Because technically, they get, well, do they get, these are going to be amendments, right? They're not going to really be new resolutions, right?
That's right.
Because they can only adopt one resolution. They can't do multiple resolutions. They'll amend this resolution
To add.
And is that are those amendments under your same time schedule?
Well, that could push you back because there are amendments to the pending resolution, so they could do it as late as the Monday before that Tuesday. But that doesn't give you guys time, so we just have to circulate a requirement before that.
Yeah, I think as long as you have to make a recommendation. And
I think we
if
just
your
need to
meeting
say
is
we're
set
going to
on
have
X
a meeting
date,
on this date.
then they know they have to get it
your
in
amendment
before that.
by that day, yeah. So that gives us a little more flexibility because it's not like they've got to file an ordinance or meet the filing deadline. It's just, okay.
Okay, so then, while we're talking, what if we try to do something maybe on the Wednesday before, Wednesday, May 1st? Are there any committee meetings or anything going on?
For some reason, I can't log in to see that.
Right now, today, May 1st looks good for me. One of those kind of first come, first served things. You know,
I'm in that, the afternoon of the 30th or the 1st is good for me. And I think we've usually tried to do this a little bit later in the day that makes it easier for folks to get here. What if we try to do something at maybe 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock on Wednesday, May 1st? How does that? John, do you know if you are available in case we have our mic, if we have questions?
I didn't know if it mattered if I was.
of course it matters.
And do y'all have a preference? I'm
that's
free
fine.
that afternoon, so
The afternoon is fine.
as far as meeting room space,
Oh,
we'll
there we
figure
have
that out.
4 of them, so.
Well, for those of you who have your calendars here, what about going ahead and scheduling a meeting for 3 or 4 on the
Why don't we say 3?
3 o'clock? Yeah, 3 o'clock on May 1st.
Works for me.
Good for me.
That's fine.
Okay, anybody have anything else that, any other discussion or thoughts about these items or our upcoming meetings or what we need to be doing next? All right, well, again, I thank everyone for being here. This is a fantastic turnout to have full contingency of the board. So if there's nothing else to do, then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Take your stuff and leave. Thank you, and Mike and John, thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Have you heard of that people are talking about other amendments?
The COB one is the only one that I've kind of heard.
It's lovely.
There are now two amendments. The state.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.